Aloha, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be across this planet. My name is Cliff Kapono. I am a surfer and a scientist who is very honored to be hosting, or I guess moderating, a conversation between two very good friends of mine. Um, Chelsea and Massey. I first met Chelsea in this little reef break on Oahu, and she was just this quiet person that didn't, bother anybody, got her waves. And I mean, over time, she had went from this like little voice out in the lineup to this huge, massive voice across millions of people. And it's been so amazing to see her move into such a very comfortable setting and sharing so much ideas to the world on a huge level. So Chelsea Massey, she's an adventurer, photographer, artist, creative, model. She moves around this world in many different things, but she's here today to speak about her connection with water. And also my good friend, Greg Long. I can't say enough good things about this guy. World champion surfer, professional athlete, one of the most technically savvy watermen on the planet, and also someone who's very intelligent when it comes to knowing where he sits in relation to the world and also with people. So I'm very happy to be here with Greg Long as well. And I'm very happy to have all these people in attendance to watch this sessions. And this session is called Falling in Love with Water. And the first maybe question I would like to ask Chelsea is for you, what does love mean for you? And then how does water play a role in that?
Well, thank you, Cliff. This is going to be so much fun. Happy to be here. I'm joining from South Africa, actually, and it's evening here. So good evening, good morning to everyone. I love this question. So I would say for me, love it's that force, it's that motivation. It's anything that asks me to be better, to be my highest self. And that's not always like an easy force. It's not always a friendly force, but there's this deep-rooted, I think, inspiration there to be amazing, to be my best. And so, to me, that's what love is. It's that thing that I can't name or can't place. And I think water has played just this huge role in shaping who I am as a person, growing up in Hawaii, growing up on an island surrounded by water. I have a fisherman for a father who basically lives on a boat out on the water. And I think it's just been this guiding force for me that helped shape a lot of the decisions I make in life. And I think water has been that thing that asked me to be more and inspired me to be more, whether that was in speaking up for oceanic causes or inspiring me into helping underserved youth learn how to surf and learn how to have more confidence through that process. I just see that in every facet of my life, that water has been that thing that calmed me down, that lifted me up, that, like love, it just makes me a better person. I'm a pretty terrible person when I'm not in the water enough, if you go that direction. Everyone's like, have you not been diving enough? You seem a little cranky. So yeah, I guess water, and specifically like the ocean, for me has just been that driver for me to want to do better in this world.
Would you say that water had a more influence on the way you love, or would you say that the way you love is because of water? What's that relationship look like for you?
I think I think anyone that grows up in around water, to me, there's this inherent kind of teacher-student relationship that I feel like I've taken on. I don't know if you feel the same way, but to me, you start to take on these lessons very, very early. And it does kind of, I don't know, it's taught me this immense respect for things that I can't change, and for things that are bigger than myself and sort of immutable in that way. And so it forces me in a way to love without this sense of immense control or immense ownership. And so I think in that sense, it does allow me to just surrender and to just love things because exactly as they are, essentially. You can't say, oh, I want the ocean to be like this way today, or oh, I only love the water when it's glassy and 2 feet and offshore and whatever, it kind of doesn't work that way to me. Um, so it has inspired my love to be, I think, more open and more of a thing that is just given versus, you know, that the object of my love is perfect all the time.
Beautiful. Thank you. And that makes me immediately think of Greg's relationship and love of water. And like everything, the balance that we say here in Hawaii, there's always that balance. And what does that balance of love, that feeling that like it hurts so much that you feel this way for something or someone, and with it being water, what's the counterpart to that, Greg, in your life when it comes to water? Because we've seen, we love watching you love water, whether it's big waves, exploration, environmentalism around water. We have that love, and that just seems like so much positivity. Do you ever experience the counterbalance to love, or is there one for you?
Absolutely. There's duality to everything in this life. It's the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative. And you can't exist in this world without living amongst both. You can try and deny that it isn't there, but it most certainly is. And, every single day with our emotions, I'm sure if we tuned into that, we would realize, that we're in this constant fluctuation, much like the ocean, changing depending, on the weather, our circumstances, how we're engaging, interacting with, one another, or, the ocean itself. So, the beauty in recognizing that, and, through my surfing career have had, tremendous, highs, and, nearly cost me my life in this pursuit of big wave surfing, which is what dedicated majority of it to. So that for me was the greatest lesson in understanding, that sort of principle of duality, that and loving both sides of the emotions. The negative parts of life in this world, we tend to shy away from or avoid. The things that make us feel that kind of heaviness and sadness. I think society has sort of impressed upon us that, you can't feel vulnerable, or you shouldn't, admit that you're, feeling sad and down in fear of, being weak. But, they're beautiful all the same as, those moments of elation. And, for those moments of deep sadness and grief, which, you can feel for something that you love so much, especially the ocean, where it exists, and, the beauty that, we try and remember it by, but at the same time there's a lot of tragedy happening. But by embracing that sort of grief, and really sitting with it on the opposite side of that, there's an expanse to love it at an even greater level. So my career of surfing has most certainly taught that, where I've had some of the most incredible life-altering experiences. I've made the greatest friends, a world of travel and experience. But at the same time, I've lost friends. I've nearly, lost my life. I've had some of the most, terrifying and fearful filled moments. But that just adds, again, side of love it, love it. And, when it comes down to that word love, it's an emotion that, only the most poetic might be able to find the words that do it justice to describe it. But it exists on a deeper level that kind of transcends, the ability to just articulate, especially when it's so meaningful. But it really is just that experience that I we're so yeah, it exists. There it is. The experience.
Wow, that's that makes me really, like, when you're saying how something that can be put into a really sad, negative, traumatic situation, that just makes the love grow even more. Or maybe love encompasses all of those feelings, and maybe we're learning that it's the love is good and bad, and
It does.
by feeling it, it grows.
Sadness and grief, that is just another expression of love. And even those moments, I guess on a shallower sense, of, let's say, disappointment, that is just another, expression of, love, that you were hoping for, a certain experience. But, it just kind of manifests.
Awesome. And before we go on, just to the audience, if you have any questions or comments for any of the speakers, please put it into the chat located on the right side of your screen and just fire away. And we'll try to get to all of those before the end of the session. I see Iski, Claire, Rodrigo. Hey, there's some familiar names already in the chat commenting. So please comment away and chat while this session is happening. Back on that topic of the diversity of love, the expansion of love in the water, Chelsea, is there a specific moment for you that you can really think about really made this love grow, especially for whether it's disappointment, whether it's just elation? Do you have one that stands out? It doesn't have to be the best or the worst, but just one right now maybe that comes to your mind. Would you mind sharing it with us?
Yes, I'd love to. So there's actually two things that come to mind. One is one of my very first memories actually in my life, which I don't have many. I don't have many like really, really clear memories, but one that stands out to me is I was out with my dad on his boat, and I was probably only maybe 5 years old or so, and I actually fell off the back of the boat while we were in transit from Kauai to Ni'ihau. So we're crossing this channel. We're in, it's thousands of fathoms deep, and I fell off the boat, and I just remember like not being afraid though, as I'm like sitting there treading water in this like vast abyss. And so I don't know if there was something inherent in me or something that was taught to me through his love of the water that just like transmitted to my soul as well. But there's just always been this like immense comfort that I've sensed being in water and being around water. And then the other moment that really, really stands out to me was actually probably something similar that Greg has experienced, was surfing and getting a little ahead of myself, getting a little cocky with my confidence and surfing waves that were probably a little outside of my skill set at the time. And my board broke. I was really, really struggling. I actually had to have someone like jump in the water and come and drag me across the reef back to the shore. And that moment, it like humbled me so, so, so much. But on the other side of that was the feeling that it was still home. It still wasn't a place that I was going to avoid. It was still a place that I was in love with. It was just a place that I needed to have more respect for. And so I don't know, I've had so many of these moments that kind of push and pull me, that are beautiful, that are great, that are super scary. That underlying life into the water is still there. Like, it's still just so
Epic. I'm hoping everyone is coming across with the internet connection okay.
find other people,
Oh.
because I think it's such a beautiful gift that like, a lot of people tell me that my images have helped them overcome a fear of the water, just because my love for it is so present for them, that it's inspired them to take some free diving lessons or even swimming lessons. And so that to me was always like, like, that's a really big gift in my life, is when I hear that someone has now found their own path and found their own home in the water, versus it being something really scary for them. And yeah, I think that's the only way that, to me, I can help inspire more people to then preserve this thing that feels very, very, very important to me and to my life and to my culture and to my just mental well-being and physical well-being, is to have people find in themselves that same, like, spark and that same feeling that this is part of, like, their home and their life as well.
So after digesting all of that, you're 5 years old and you fall off a boat in the middle of the channel, on one of the gnarliest channels on the planet. Is that did I hear that right? And that's what grew your love for the ocean. Okay, you're gnarly. And I think you saying that you have this opportunity now to help people find their own love and inspire other people, and you recognize that, and it's cool that you take it seriously. I think it's important that we have that kind of self-accountability to know that every action we have in this world has a reaction somewhere, and that it's around water for you. It's really inspiring. And Gregory, I mean, would you be willing to share with us something similar? What was maybe a specific instance where your expansion of love really developed in the water?
Yeah. Going back to my earliest childhood years, which are arguably most formidable when it comes to developing your personality characteristics and what is going to sort of be the future path in your life, or at least through your early teens. And when it comes to the ocean, it kind of seems like when you're introduced as a child, it never really leaves your life ever. And for me, it was my early surf sessions with my father. I was very lucky where he was a career lifeguard. So we grew up, on and in the water before, we could actually, walk, hanging on to his, back, riding waves. But as a child, my introduction to surfing was a lot different than what a lot of other kids experienced and, continue to experience, where it wasn't just this, hey, grab your board, go run down and jump in. When I would go surfing with my father, there was always that moment of sitting on the sand before and really observing your surroundings and paying attention to what's actually happening, how big the waves are, what direction are they coming from, where are the potential hazards and dangers. And for me as a child, kind of adopting that sort of study of it before going in and recreating created just a sort of sense of confidence and understanding. And that's where I think a lot of people are, there's sort of that disconnect in that next step of truly, being in love with it, because they aren't necessarily comfortable, because it is such an unpredictable and challenging environment. So all of those early sessions, sitting there, with him, and, he would ask, the questions of, okay, what's happening? What does it seem like is happening with the swell? What's the tide doing? And that has been an integral part of every single, session, thereafter of my life. Now, it doesn't necessarily happen, where I sit down and, take the 5, 10, sometimes 20 minutes we would sit together, where I can look at it in an instant, or, have all the information ahead of time. from, you know, researching what's happening with the weather and all that. But just those early sessions with my father would have been, I think, you know, the most pivotal for me, of just totally feeling comfortable and in love with it, and, you know, led to the whole world of, you know, ways that you can, you know, recreate in the ocean, you know, surfing, diving, body surfing, you know, whatever it was, you know, when I get in the ocean, it feels like it's absolute home for me. And, you know, I know undoubtedly, you know, created, you know, the world that I live in now, you know, where everything is based around how close can I stay to the water.
I can 100,000% relate to that story about sitting there with your dad. I used to do the same thing with my dad, to the point where he would test me, and if I got it wrong, we would leave the beach and I wouldn't even be able to go in the water. So it was very serious. Winds, currents, hazards was a very serious thing in my family. My dad ran a tight ship, as they say, when it comes to the ocean. So I'm not sure if it was as that intense for you, but it's very cool to see that those interactions happen. And, you know, yeah, I'm excited to engage now, you know, now in this point in my life with, you know, those types of stories. So if you're just joining us in the sessions, the Sea Change on Water, falling in love with water session here, I'm joined by Chelsea Yamase and Greg Long, two amazing ocean storytellers and athletes. I'm Cliff Kapono, here just moving the conversation along. If you just filled in, Chelsea fell off a boat in a channel when she was 5 years old, and she's crazy. And Greg gets disciplined if he doesn't surf 100-foot waves at 5 years old. So we're here with some amazing people. We'll start moving to some maybe the questions, because we have some pretty nice questions here coming in the chat. We have Emily Chang. How does your guys' love of water fuel your environmental and sustainable efforts in your lifestyle and the work you do in the world? Either one of you want to start? Maybe Chelsea?
Sure. Yeah. Well, gosh, so my work actually in photography and modeling and all of this, and making films, started from free diving, actually. So there's a really direct connection there for me. I didn't actually start free diving until I was in my mid-20s, so fairly late in life compared to a lot of people that grow up in Hawaii. But it was through that journey of first learning to scuba dive and then learning to free dive, and just really having so much fun with that, and starting to take photos of the underwater world and going deeper and learning more, that inspired my photography journey, my journey on social media. And I think that being such a big part of my, I guess, origin story in a lot of ways, made me feel like I wanted to give, it just really made me want to give back also in some way to this thing that has given so much to me in my life. It's enabled me to travel around the world and, you know, photograph some really amazing places and coral reefs. And when you're just exposed to all of that, you know, both all of that like beauty through travels and through my photography work, and also the realization on the other side of that wow, I am in the middle of Indonesia, I'm in the middle of French Polynesia, I'm in South Africa, all these places, and there's marine debris and there's plastic pollution and there are coral reefs being bleached and mass bleaching events, that, you know, I'm in Australia and I'm diving the Great Barrier Reef, but that this reef is very much, you know, dead and dying. I think it was a natural course progression for me that, you know, first it's this exciting love, and it's, I don't want to say a shallow love, but it was just a love like, wow, I love diving, I love being underwater, this is so cool, this is so new to me. there's dolphins and turtles and wow. But then I think like anything, as you mature in that love and as you fall deeper into it, there becomes this sense of like responsibility and sense like of, you know, that you need to also give back to this place and protect this place. So that was kind of what it's that starting out free diving and then still doing that now, that's really been a through thread for all of my work in promoting ocean conservation and different and connecting with different ocean-minded people around the world through my work in film and photography.
Awesome. Yeah, that is you know, when you have these opportunities to see the world, it does put a new spin on it when you see both sides of it, like the love conversation. You know, you see the breadth of what is really going on when you're there on the ground, and to see so much different types of environments all kind of being pressured the same way, it really makes us to think about what's that through line as a species across the planet, and what are some of our behaviors that are potentially impacting those things and those consistencies of maybe environmental degradation. But with Greg, I know a lot of just the companies you work with, to the way you approach traveling across the world and even staying local. You know, how does your love for exploring and discovery play into exploring and discovering new ways to find sustainability?
Yeah. Well, I'll be the first to admit that, you know, once upon a time, you know, my life was so just focused on my professional surfing career, and the amount of time that I, you know, allocated to, you know, the environmental education that I'm, you know, a large part of my life now, was really insignificant to that of, you know, my drive, you know, to pursue those goals and dreams that I had of riding the world's biggest waves. And, you know, I was one of the biggest jet setters, you know, of them all, you know, where I'd look at the weather models and see a giant storm on the other side of the world. And, you know, if I could get there in time and the waves are going to be good, I wouldn't, you know, think twice of, you know, loading up the big board bags and going. And, you know, that was kind of, you know, upon realizing that dream of a professional surfer at 18, which, even though I came from, you know, a special background where my dad was, you know, a lifeguard and a park ranger, and he was heavily involved in protecting and preserving all the, you know, local state beaches where I grew up in San Clemente, California. So there's always that, you know, awareness around, you know, the importance of environmental conservation. You know, when you're young, you know, you're a bit naive, as I admittedly was. And, you know, I was just kind of go. And, you know, okay, a little bit of time to, you know, work or help out with a different project or initiative. And as I continued to travel and, you know, revisiting a lot of the places, you know, I sort of had, you know, the prominent areas that I would travel to, you know, year after year, it became very noticeable the changes taking place, especially in those, you know, developing countries that don't sort of have the, you know, environmental laws, you know, or protection, you know, to ensure that there isn't some atrocious, you know, building project, you know, popping up on some, you know, beautiful native, you know, sand dune, you know, beach, you know, or a wave being destroyed. And then, you know, revisiting places like Indonesia, where, you know, I first went in the early 2000s, and, you know, that was right as, you know, sort of plastic became, you know, a really observable, you know, problem. And then year after year, just, you know, continued to get worse and worse. And, you know, witnessing that, and everything just seeming to be accelerated at this last, you know, decade, you know, and whether it's, you know, because it actually has been, I think it's been accelerating and at the same, you know, speed for a long period of time. It's just more visible, you know, the way that we're all connected through, you know, social media, that there's nothing that can really, you know, hide anymore, which is beautiful. But it was in the observation of all these changes taking place, you know, that it was, you know, realized, and a couple of pivotal things happening in my, you know, surfing life, that, you know, the realization that, you know, the waves that I was riding, you know, they just, and those goals and dreams, they served as incredible inspiration and sort of a guiding light on my path. But, you know, acknowledging that there's something so much more important than another world title or another, big wave. And, for me, it was the acknowledgement of, what I considered, upon reflecting my life to be my greatest accomplishments. And it was all those small moments of, helping to give something back in some form or another, whatever it may have been, whether it was an environmental project or a social project. And so it was in my early 30s where it was just a big shift of where I was putting my energy and my focus, and, finding a better balance where I still love surfing big waves. And, the amount that I travel is, a fraction of what it used to be, upon realizing that, hey, my own actions here are contributing to these, problems, that I'm, as we all are, we all have contributed to them. So, I still acknowledge I'm so far from being perfect, but it's a constant strive to improve and be better and continually learn. And then share, what I've learned with other people in hopes that, it may, have that sort of spark or aha moment, which, again, I was fortunate enough to be gifted in my life to sort of, rechange and reintegrate a lot of, new thoughts around, the, more of a sustainable lifestyle and incorporating the environmental education and conservation, sort of the priority of my life. And then, the wave riding happens, in a harmonious, way, because, the two go hand in hand.
It seems like between both of you, a shared theme is this idea of adventure and discovery and finding new things. And it seems like even in these recent years, in both of your careers, you've taken the exploration, discovery into more understanding where you folks fit in this bigger conversation of global stewardship. And it's really inspiring to see both of you pursuing on a very, very high level both those endeavors, and not compromising your career in order to advance a community aspect that is founded in environmental stewardship. It's very inspirational, and something that I recognize is, even us three on this call, we're very privileged to grow up and live literally stone's throw away from the ocean, and our geographic location has influenced that relationship, our love for the water. We've developed careers around it. We've developed relationships around it. Water in its ocean form, I think, between all of us has something we share. We probably don't see our lives without it, in any capacity. But there are people out there that maybe aren't as privileged as us and don't have that connection. For people like that who maybe are in the high mountains or in the desert, perhaps, what would you say is a way for them to allow that development of love, the whole diverse balance of love, the full conversation of what love means in the water? How would you folks maybe, encourage those, whether they're in a underserved community or, again, maybe in the desert? How can we take everyday action to facilitate a healthy love relationship with water? Chelsea, would you like to share, or Greg, whoever?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And we are so privileged to, like you said, have grown up in a place that's fosters, such a natural way, that love for the ocean. And I'm actually curious, when you were asking this question, I see the intention behind it, but I almost feel like there's this part of me that says, okay, if there's someone who grows up in the high mountains or the desert or whatever that is, something like a lesson, I guess, that's really been resonating with me lately is, how can I be part of the solution, or how can I be connected from where I stand and from who I am as a person? And so I think we need everyone in this capacity. We don't just need people who love the ocean and who love wildlife or who love waves. We need all of these people who are in love with the forests and in love with, maybe, there's people that I'm so inspired by that do hunting for different types of fungi, or have just a completely different sense of the world and what they connect with and I've bridging with some of these people in the mountains and what they recognize and what they see in the environment around them has been such a cool lens for me to be able to put on and see it through their eyes. And so I don't know, I see where you're going with this, but there's almost this part of me that feels like we all each inherently maybe identify with or have learned a lot of lessons from a specific place or a specific culture or a specific environment. And I, for one, love the diversity of that and would love to be open to learning lessons from all of these people and all of these places around the world, because I think they all have different types of native intelligence and knowledge in that.
Yeah, totally. How if the conversation is it about more about love or water or loving water and knowing that love exists in all aspects of our planet, and if you just bring love to the table, then in the end water will be affected in some capacity, or someone's relationship will be affected. That's very beautiful. And Greg, do you have any insights or?
So that's obviously, the lack or the challenge of accessing the ocean is a big crux when it comes to protecting it. We all know that people if you don't have a connection to something, you're not going to go that extra mile or change in your life to protect it. So when you look at the majority of people in this world are living away from the ocean, how do you make that connection? It's very, very difficult. When you talk about underserved communities, one of the amazing things that I've seen happening in that respect in recent months with sort of the social struggle and the inequity that exists in our everyday lives, that's really been kind of coming to light and is now a very prevalent conversation, is a change in people's exception and looking for ways to create greater inclusion when it comes, and I'm speaking more I guess from the surfing world. A lot more organizations who have been trying to make the connections from underserved inner city populations, or connecting indigenous Native American into people, bringing them from the reservation to reconnect with the ocean. That there's a lot more attention to those organizations, and I think community support in order to facilitate that work. So that's one way of, I guess, or some really positives that have sort of come in the recent months. But then connecting people who may live in the mountains, as you said, or the deserts. I think understanding, and this is something I usually try and share with people, that we are all connected no matter where we are in this world, and all you have to do is look at the flow of water. And even though you might not live in the ocean, that ocean is directly connected to that peak and that mountaintop that you live on. So if you're a mountaineer or a snowboarder, what you're gliding down, that is going to end up eventually out there, and what we're riding, we're connected to. Same with all the lakes and the rivers. And so don't necessarily need to just identify it with the ocean or surfing or these activities that we partake in, but what connection to water can you create in and around where you live. So if you're entirely landlocked in the desert, where is that nearest body of water? And we were chatting about it before we started the session. Incredible book, Blue Mind, by Dr. Wallace J. Nichols proves that any time spent next to any body of water brings about that sense of calmness, and scientifically proven to create those that dopamine and endorphin rush that we feel when we get in the ocean. So looking for that body of water and knowing that we're all directly connected through that. is what I suggest for people who may not have the opportunity on a regular basis to actually get to the sea itself.
Yeah, I really love that, talking about we have to create our connection, and we have the opportunity to create that connection to whatever capacity, and something that I think even in the desert, at one point that was perhaps the ocean floor. We see in a lot of paleontology that a lot of marine creatures live in, or their fossils are in the deserts. Some of the best places to see these organisms from long past. And again, as a native person in Hawaii, genealogy and history is very important to going to our future. So even if you look at your water genealogy in a place, either whether it's current or past or future, water, like you said, does have that there. And it just takes us being creative, and also bringing, like you said, Chelsea, to the table, other forms of love and relationships to it to really enhance this idea. So it's a very beautiful conversation. Again, this breadth of what love is, the diversity, the positives, negatives, the balance, and also where we fit in water across the planet. But while we have just a few minutes left, there's been a few questions regarding some sustainable life hacks, I would say. Maybe the top three, maybe not top three, or just maybe three things that you folks do in your day-to-day to try to contribute to the environmental conscious conversation around the world. So either Greg, you want to start with maybe some three things?
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually connect this to a previous question that I saw go through there. The fact that I still do travel, I still jump on a plane to much, as I said, much less frequent than I used to, but keep track of all of my travels, how much I'm driving, and able to calculate what the CO2 emissions are, that, and then make an effort to contribute to blue carbon sequestration projects. One of them called Sea Trees, which was created by another organization I do some work with, Sustainable Surf, and a few other projects around the world. So that's one, was obviously slowing down, how much I'm moving around the world, and adopting the idea of, rather than exploring, a mile wide, let's look deeper into, those kind of local areas, so where, especially in this last year, we haven't been able to, freely move about, of just, really exploring, what's in our own backyards, which I've really, enjoyed tremendously, and learned so much more about, what exists here in Southern California, or, wherever else I may be, spending time, versus that, having to, move and chase, everything around. When it comes to plastic, obviously, the attempt to live, a plastic-free lifestyle, go to my, bulk food place, and takes a little bit more effort, but something that you can be really proud of, at the end of the day. And, a big part of everything for me, is, comes down to a lack of education. So as I said, admitting that I'm not perfect, and I know that I probably never will be in this lifetime until I move to my own farm off the grid and the sticks, and you probably will never hear from me again. But I don't think that that's I know that's not what I'm meant to be doing, and I don't think that that's what we're all meant to be doing. And it's the reality is it's never going to happen. So just simply trying to educate what I'm learning, what's getting me excited, and how I can implement that into my lifestyle, in hopes of inspiring other people. And I think that we all need to continue to do that. That the challenging part with the world and being outspoken, everybody has an opinion, and it's very quick that somebody will come down and try and find holes in what you're sharing, and it can turn people off from being vocal, or again sharing the knowledge that they're accumulating, and wanting to pass that on to others. So but not being afraid of being imperfect, and just admitting that we all think we can all agree that we need to be doing better, and whatever those steps look like for you at this point in your time, small, maybe big, any forward progress is invaluable at this time. We all need to be doing our part in our own unique lives, whatever it may look like. And yeah, sharing that, because without knowledge and passing it on, there's definitely going to be no hope. So yeah, those are kind of three real quick, easy things every single day that incorporating.
Awesome. And Chelsea?
Yeah, I love what Greg said about the idea, obviously, of just any type of progress over that idea of perfection. What I tried to do in my life, because I care so much, but there's so many things coming at you, and we are all living within a system that is a flawed design. It's like he said, if you go, unless you're living on this farm off in the middle of nowhere, it's very hard within the current system to be absolutely perfect. But what I did with my life was look, and I kind of do this with everything. It's like, what's my 80-20 rule? What are the few things that are going to make the biggest impact on what my actual say carbon footprint is, or my environmental impact? And so the areas that I personally chose were diet. I went to a more plant-based eating habits, or some very selective locally sourced fish or things like that, because again, my dad's a fisherman. But really being more aware of that in my life, because that just was a personal kind of commitment that I could make from an environmental standpoint. So that was one. Another was to have very clear guidelines on like work relationships and what I wanted to stand for in what I wanted to magnify on my channel, and realizing that I have a very a voice out there. And I think in this way everyone has a voice. I think my greatest success story was actually influencing my mom in particular. She works in a hotel, and just seeing the changes that she was making within her hotel, because she was inspired by the ways that we were changing in our own home, was really cool, just to see on that one-to-one level how the networking effect can start to spread out. And I think that goes back to that education piece that Greg was talking about. So being passionate about sharing, even just these little swaps or little things of not using as much plastic, were that was just to see that network effect. And then the kind of the third area that I dove into was with travel. All of us have had a lot of opportunities to go places, and one of the main reasons I actually moved to the place that I'm in now was in an effort to cut down significantly on travel, and to ride share more, or to ride my e-bike a lot more, to just run. So there's a whole household of us that kind of came together, and we decided we're all just gonna share one car, or use ride sharing and things like that. So anywhere that I can be more efficient and be less resource intensive in my traveling. It's actually been super fun riding my bike around and being able to do that, and it's allowed me a different view of my neighborhood and of my community. And it's not something that I ever thought I would do, but if that's an option for someone, I really do recommend it. I think it's a fantastic way to just kind of get around your community and see it in a different light. So
Awesome. I think those are great encouragements to our audience members, and this idea of environmental consciousness, right? We're just trying to elevate our consciousness, and that means understanding, and that's what we're trying to do. collectively. And I think that's such great advice and encouragement for people to find their own consciousness, because without an environmental consciousness, that relationship with love and water would fail to exist. So I would like to thank you folks, both Greg and Chelsea, for being here today and sharing with your experiences, or sharing experience with the audience and myself. And also thank you to the audience for hanging in there and engaging and putting out some great questions. Again, I'm here with adventure storytellers, environmentalists, athletes, Greg Long, Chelsea Massey. Thank you so much, everyone, and we look forward to the next session. I'm Cliff. Thank you for joining. Aloha, everyone.
Thanks, Cliff.
Cliff.